Welcome to everyone. We're excited that you're here tonight. My name is Catherine Cheval. I'm Dean of the College of Education at UIC, and this is our sixth edition of the Dean's Forum. And so tonight, I just want to get started with a few housekeeping items before we get into our conversation. So we ask that all participants are muted during the initial part. There will be an opportunity for question and answers at the end. And please keep your cameras on if you're comfortable with that. It is an interactive session, so feel free to put things in the chat. Or we also have, oops, let's see if we can. We also have a document that if you prefer not to put comments in the chat, but would prefer to put it into a Google Doc, we'll put that link into the chat so you can type it in there, and those behind the scenes will be reading those and keeping track of it. And this is being recorded and it'll be made available on the College of Education's website. That's on my leadership page. So the previous 5 editions are there if you're interested in looking at past issues. And then finally, you'll be emailed a brief survey after tonight to give us feedback on how we can make these sessions better in the future. We'd love to know your thoughts. So now I'll get us started here. Do you have anybody in the waiting room? Nope. Okay, we're gonna head in then. So first of all, I just want to thank you for investing your time in the Dean's Forum. I know your time is precious. And there's lots of things that you could be doing with your evening time. So we're grateful that you're willing to invest that commodity to get to know more about the amazing work of the faculty and staff in the College of Education. And tonight we'll also have the opportunity to hear from 3 of our alumni and their experiences with the program. So you all know that UIC is unique in countless ways. Needless to say, our access and opportunity mission is at the top of that list. And so tonight we will have the opportunity to learn from faculty and staff about their efforts to design flexible academic programs that put students first. And we'll also hear about the impact of those design features from 3 of our alumni. So to kick us off, I would like to introduce our faculty and staff who will be highlighted tonight. First, we have Kathy Main, who is Director of Early Childhood Education in the College of Education. Professor Ev Smith, who serves as the Program Coordinator of the Masters in Measurement, Evaluation, Statistics, and Assessment, our online MESA program. And Natalie Veska, who serves as the Director of the Early Childhood Alternative Licensure Program. So welcome to Kathy, Ev, and Natalie. And so we're gonna, this will just be an informal conversation tonight and getting to hear a little bit about the history of these efforts. So to get us started, Evan, Kathy, we would love to know what facilitates your passion or what energizes you in the work that you do. So Kathy, why don't you get us started?
Sure. Thank you so much, Dean Cheval. And I really appreciate everyone who's on this call tonight. It's great to see some former colleagues from the Department of Ed Psych and current colleagues in Ed Psych, as well as alumni from our programs, our early childhood programs, both ALP and the MED. So see, what a great question, and what gets me excited and passionate about this work. I think what really gets me excited and passionate about this work is in my 31 plus years of working at UIC and working directly in classrooms with young children and families. It's the people who actually work with young children and families. And that's what really got me motivated to think about the program that we designed, which is the UIC Early Childhood Alternative Licensure Program. And that's a program we're actually featuring tonight at this forum to talk more about. And I started thinking about a program like this and designing a program based on visiting classrooms and seeing teachers who are working mostly in community-based agencies who I thought were some of the best teachers I'd ever seen across the board. And they were the best teachers out there because they were teachers who were really truly of and from their communities. And thanks, Natalie, right? They were really of and from their communities, and they were really committed to their communities. And they had a certain style with children and families that I thought was the sort of thing that we wanted to see for children. I think we all know in early childhood, the years of birth through age 5 are the most critical years with regard to brain development. And the single factor that has the greatest impact on classroom quality and children's development is really the interactions, relationships, and knowledge and skills of those teachers. So that's what got me motivated to get into this work and to design this sort of program. And it's a very specific program, and you'll hear a little bit more about the details as we go through the conversation tonight. But this group of teachers that we're serving in the alternative licensure program are teachers who have years of experience. They have lots of trainings, and they also all have bachelor's degrees. What they didn't have was the Illinois Professional Educator license. And that license is something really important for our field to have for early childhood teachers to have that license. Because having a teacher license and having an early childhood teacher license in early childhood elevates the importance of early childhood. Teaching young children is just as sophisticated, complex, and as important as teaching elementary age children, high school children, and even in higher ed. So that license designates the importance of that. Also, the license requires a teacher performance assessment, and that's a really important part of making sure that we have the best teachers and the most highly qualified teachers in front of our very youngest children. And then thirdly, in some of the studies that we've been doing on this program, we recognize that the license is about the only lever that really moves the compensation needle for early childhood teachers. So those things are really important to us, and that's what sort of motivated me to design a program specifically for this amazing group of teachers and specific around earning the license. So that's sort of what got me jazzed. I'm going to turn it over to you, Ev, about what got you all jazzed.
Thanks, Kath. Boy, I think it's partly hereditary for me. I come from a family of teachers. I've been actually teaching in some form or another since I was in 7th grade. I started out by helping my mother tutor some of the kids in her special education classes after school. So I've been teaching for probably, boy, I hate to admit it, probably over 40 years now. I used to do adult ed. And then when I was getting my degree in teaching in secondary mathematics, I ran into a class regarding assessment, and I didn't know anything about assessment at the time. And this is in my master's program. And I was pretty good at math. And this really opened a whole new field for me because I had no idea the field of assessment even existed. So while I was going to go on to be a secondary math teacher, the professor at the time in that assessment course said, "Hey, we just got a grant from the federal government. Would you like to come back for your doctorate?" And I was like, well, let's escape reality for a few more years. I'll go on for my doctorate and then go back to teaching. I got into my doctoral program at the University of Connecticut, got my degree in psychometrics, which is basically a combination of psychology, statistics, and measurement, and then wound up in academia instead of teaching at the secondary level. But the wedding of the assessment and the mathematics is a common theme with a lot of people that get into my field. And I find a lot of them really back into it. So that's what got me into the field. What got me to UIC is in the early 90s when I was at another university. I knew the original MESA program, and we'll get into a little bit more about what MESA is shortly, was housed at the University of Chicago. And they actually had produced some of the greatest methodologists in the world at the University of Chicago. So in 98, when the job opportunity at UIC came up, I knew there's going to be a real need, not only in the city, but nationally and now internationally for another MESA program. Now, I knew the faculty at UC. They let me steal the MESA name from the University of Chicago with their blessing. And so we kind of took over for the University of Chicago's MESA program in developing first the PhD in MESA here, then the campus master's program. And then tonight, what we'll talk about a bit more is the online program in MESA, the MED and the certificate program. So that's kind of how I got into it. Again, I think I was always destined to be teaching. I just thought I'd be teaching at a secondary level rather than this post-secondary level.
Yeah, great.
Back to you, Dean Cheval.
Yeah, appreciate that. let's see. So you're both trailblazers in thinking on how to design courses and programs differently than how they were designed in the earlier years in the College of Education and higher ed overall. So tell us a little bit about your individual programs and what motivated you to think differently. Let's see. Ev, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Well, I was like I just mentioned, I was self-motivated to get the PhD off the ground back in '98. The dean at the time, seeing the success with the PhD, allowed us to hire 2 more Mesa faculty at the time. And then we launched the campus program. Then in about 2007, 2008, the dean, oh, thank you, Sandra. This is just some background about what the MESA stands for. It just stands for Measurement, Evaluation, Statistics, and Assessment. And a number of years ago, the faculty came up with these terms to kind of describe it for your reference. But in 2007, 2008, the dean at the time said, Everett, the College of Education doesn't have any online programs. Put the master's program in Mesa online. You're going to be the college guinea pig. So the dean gave us the resources and allowed us to hire some folks to help us transition our campus material to online material. And after a global scan, I think in early 2008, there was literally not one fully online graduate program to Mesa in the world. So we were actually the first to launch starting in 2008, 2009. Now, some of the earlier decisions that we had to make, how big of a scope did we want? And for that, we really wanted to reach an international audience. And because of that, some of the design features of our program, we had to decide between synchronous and asynchronous learning. Now, if we were just going to be local or regional, synchronous learning might be fine. We wanted an international reach. And I saw one of our very first international students online tonight. So thank you, Jerome, for joining us here. So asynchronous is basically at any time during the week, the student can log in and conduct the weekly activities. So that was one of the important design features that we had to make. I also think it was important to be asynchronous because not everybody can log in 5 to 8 Chicago time to take classes. And for people that don't have access, I know some of our alumni don't have access to a D1 university near them, or even if they do, they may not have the free time to actually get there. So I think the online aspect of the delivery is also important. Did we have another slide in there, Sandra, please? I believe.
Yep. Is she there? There she is.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, we launched in 08, 09. We did that environmental scan of the globe, and we were the first to launch. Now, since that point in time, there's been a half a dozen or so other competitors that have cropped up. But part of my job as the program coordinator is, like every other year, we take a look at their curriculum and we compare it to our curriculum. And I can say pretty safely, and I tell all of our prospective students to do their due diligence because I'm not trying to hide anything. We still have the best curriculum in the game. We have, I believe, the most rigorous curriculum and most flexible curriculum. So regardless of what kind of profession you want to apply your methodological skills in, we're going to be able to meet that needs. We have a lot of courses in the MES and all the areas. The accessibility I kind of already discussed, that's the online asynchronous nature. And the rigor part of it is in the curriculum scans of our competitors, we're still the only game literally in the world that really offers people on an asynchronous nature some advanced coursework in statistics and psychometrics and program evaluation. So I guess the bottom line is why people come to study Mesa at UIC, both at a master's and a doc level, rigorous and applicable training in quantitative and qualitative methods, not only for educational testing, but healthcare and the social science research settings, as Dean Cheval will show you shortly. So we basically prepare you for careers anywhere methodological skills are required. So that could be academic institutions. I know the state and federal agencies. I just got an email from the FDA a short time ago. They're looking for a psychometrician. School districts always have armies of evaluators, statisticians, psychometricians, and then again, more broadly, just the testing industry. And
Thank
with
you.
that, I'm going to hand it back to Dean Cheval.
All right, thank you, Bev. Appreciate that. So Kathy, same questions to you. Tell us a little bit about the ALP program. what motivated you to think differently about the design, and how is it different from other programs in early childhood?
So this kind of goes back to a story. It must have been over 20 years ago. I was asked by the organizers of a local conference that we have here in Chicago, the Chicago Metro Association for Early Childhood. I always had a huge conference that drew all the early childhood Chicago teachers to it. And they asked me, and along with a few other program coordinators from different early childhood teacher preparation programs, to sit in a room on the lunch break and review folks' transcripts to see what they actually needed to earn the Illinois Professional Educator License, which I mentioned earlier was what was so important for our field. And the line was wrapped around the door, and people were coming in not just on the lunch break. All afternoon I sat in that room along with my colleagues from other institutions who ran programs. And what we saw was our workforce had many credit hours, lots of some college, sometimes more than 120 credit hours, but not an AA degree, not a BA degree. Some had a BA degree, but they did not have any option or pathway into the license at all that was attached to the BA degree. And so I started to realize that there were not only were these folks working in an early childhood system that was dysfunctional because it's underfunded and it's very fragmented, they were also part of a teacher preparation system that was also really fragmented. And there weren't good opportunities for these people to have access into programs that really particularly met their needs. And so that's sort of what motivated me to design a program that was really specific, and that instead of putting up barriers for this group of people, the idea was we were going to honor the strengths that they brought to the program. And we knew they were bringing in lots of experience. As you can see in the program, the average years of experience for our students is 15 years. We also knew that they were often, as I mentioned before, of and from their community, and they had something that was going to be important, but wasn't necessarily recognized in traditional teacher preparation programs. So the first thing that I did in the second iteration of alternative licensure is really thinking about, it's not the license that's alternative, it's alternative of how we do things. And the first thing was figuring out financial aid. Normally people get into a program and then they apply for financial aid and they look at what's available. I knew for this particular group that that was a barrier to even apply to a program, not being sure of how you're going to pay for it. So one of the big design features is that we collaborate really closely with the Chicago Early Learning Workforce Scholarship. So all of the students in the UIC Alternative Licensure Program have their tuition fees and books all paid for through a scholarship program. We also revamped our admissions policies. Traditional admissions policies, we're tending to look at GPA and looking at maybe the courses that folks had taken. And we really moved away from that because we were recognizing that for some folks, one poor grade that you got in your undergrad or while you were studying at a community college, that could just knock you out of access and opportunity into a program to earn a teacher license. So we moved away from looking at that and instead kept looking at, what's your commitment, what's your experience with children, and then what is your set of courses, and how we sort of turn that into looking at it more broadly from a competency lens versus a course-to-course transfer lens. So we designed a program that accepted courses from both community colleges, also four-year institutions, and we sort of package it together to make sure that we put all the courses that everyone had also then met the curriculum content requirements for licensure and what we know supports a great early childhood teacher. And then we collaborated with city colleges so that if somebody was missing a core competency through a core course, they could take that course at city colleges, which might be more convenient for them and might be offered at different times. So that was another really important design feature that we had done in the program. Then the other huge barrier for folks in attending teacher licensure program was actually the state content test. We knew that our students knew the content inside and out, and we knew that they knew how to work with young children, families, communities, and had all the skills. But there was the test itself was creating some kind of barriers because, again, the folks we were working with had been out of school for a while, and they didn't always have the best test taking skills. So we knew if we worked with them and taught them basic test taking skills, that they always had the capacity and capability to pass the test. So we put that into our program, and that became very, very successful. And all of our students do successfully pass that test because they do have the knowledge and the skills to do it. Then the other part that we started to recognize was a huge barrier for our incumbent workforce, folks who are already working with young children and families, doing amazing work with them and making great contributions to their community. Traditional teacher preparation programs require a traditional student teaching, which sort of means you go into someone else's classroom and work under the support of a mentor teacher there. And we knew that our students could not leave their classroom. So we reversed the model and we went into their classrooms instead. And we use a residency model where we mentor them directly in their place of employment. And then another key feature too that we do in the program that we think makes a tremendous impact on our great retention rates and the success of the program is we have a coaching model based on reflective supervision. And reflective supervision is actually a style of coaching that comes from the infant mental health literature. And the thing that it pays most attention to is recognizing the emotional toll that people have from working with young children and their families, particularly young children and families from underserved communities and children in chaotic communities. When we think about what's happening right now in our communities and what our teachers are experiencing, it's absolutely critical that they have these coaches who are highly skilled in this reflective supervision because they can help them carry that load and those challenges and those types of things that they're experiencing and help them process through that and become a more reflective teacher in the entire process. And we really base all of our coaching and all of our interactions that we have with our students sort of on our creed, which is do unto others as you want them to do unto others. And we want them to be there for the most vulnerable children, families, and communities as best as they possibly can. So we try to create that space where we're there for them too. And so anything, Natalie, who will talk in just a minute, will talk a little bit more about this probably too, but she often says to students, I'm the barrier remover. Tell me what it is that is getting in the way of you coming to class, or tell me what is getting in the way of you getting this paper done. And you know, I can figure out how to do that. And this model, we've been very fortunate from, yeah, Jeanette, right? You know all about that, right? So, so we have been very fortunate that this has also been recognized by some private philanthropy of saying that, like, we know that sometimes it's the tiniest little thing that can stop somebody from continuing in their program and continuing to be successful. And so we're constantly making sure that we have that sort of support for them. So I think, you know, that's really what we think about when we think about the design. We look at who our students are, and then how are we those folks that guide them on the side to be successful through the program.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Kathy. You know, you talked about the apprenticeship model, and Kathy and her team were able to get a new Department of Labor grant at the end of last year on registered apprenticeships. And so they're getting lots of phone calls. How do you do this work? And being one of the first in the country, maybe the first in early childhood to get one of those grants. So congratulations on that. And I will say the other thing that's before we turn it over to Natalie is, you know, I don't know what you teach in your coaching and your courses, but you also teach them your students how to be advocates. And so they came down to my office and they sat me down and they said, can you talk to the faculty about reducing the amount of reading? because that's a barrier for us. So they also learn to advocate for themselves and what they need. So I appreciate that. All right, Natalie Vesca, we're going to take it over to you. So, Natalie is one of the biggest cheerleaders. If it isn't Kathy, Natalie's right up there as one of the biggest cheerleaders for these students in this program. And if you ever need a pick me up at the end of the year, ask for an invitation to the completer ceremony in December because it is the best event that we host in the college. So, Natalie, what facilitates your passion? Or what energizes you in the work that you do with ALP or just in early childhood in general?
What facilitates my passion, in many ways, what I do is a tribute to my mother, who was also a teacher. Um, and so that energizes me. But I think what energizes me the most is seeing people step into their own power, seeing our teachers step into their own power, and seeing that transformation happen right in front of us. So you watch someone who once doubted whether they even belonged in higher ed start to carry themselves very differently, with confidence, with pride, because they've finally been given that support and structure they need to succeed. And you see our teachers juggling full-time jobs, families, just a bunch of coursework. They show up exhausted, and yet they're still determined. And so one day when you see them teaching in their own classrooms, it really is like witnessing a quiet kind of revolution, right? So one that starts in a single person and then it ripples out to the rest of the children in their classrooms. And then it reaches the children's families, and then it reaches the communities. And so I would say that that is what energizes me the most and what keeps me going.
Yeah, that's awesome. Help those that aren't familiar with the program. So they work all day with children in early childhood centers or schools, and then they come to class. I
And
don't know
then
if I could do that. I would be so, I was working with little I was helping out in a daycare center for a few days because the leader had to be gone and I'd come home and I'd fall in the bed and I'd just collapse. And so the amount of motivation and energy that takes to show up here at UIC after a long day with children, that's really impressive. So that goes, I think, also to what Kathy was talking about, the change in the model, that how do you design the coursework around their work schedule and their family commitments. So
right. We've made it really convenient for all of the teachers in our program because classes are at night and they're once a week. And they take one class a semester so that they're not entirely overloaded and overburdened with everything else that is also going on in their life. So one class a week, one class a semester. And I'm really happy that Sandra Jimenez is here to talk more about that when it's her turn to speak.
well, she is next. So I hope you have unmute there, Sandra. So why and how has the ALP program been transformational for you? And welcome back. We're glad you're one of our treasured alums.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm so honored to be here. I just wanted to start off with telling you a little bit about my background. So actually, I brought some pictures.
Oh, nice.
I don't know if you could see it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So here's me and my three brothers. Here's my first communion, and my family downstairs, right there down there, with my mother. And though we look really happy, all these pictures were actually taken in shelters. So I grew up I lived in shelters. I lived in domestic violence. I was a child in special education. And I was pretty much just a statistic. And I remember as a child going to school and not seeing a teacher that looked like me, that had the same skin color as me, that spoke my language. And I never understood why. So as I continued my education, I went up the grades. I started to recognize this is so hard. This is so difficult. From trauma to, poverty to being a minority, and I started to think about my peers, and I said, okay, if this is me with my story, how many of my peers have a similar story like myself? And how many obstacles do we have to overcome? And it was very difficult for me, and I continued my education. I finally received my BA, and my whole family was very excited for me, except myself. There's a little secret that I never told anyone. I actually changed my degree path from early childhood education to early childhood practice. The main difference is a test that has to be taken. And I thought someone in special education was never going to be able to pass this test. So I'm not even going to try. I'm not going to risk, wasting money, wasting time. And I changed my whole degree path. And though I had my diploma and I had my degree, I was not satisfied with it. And that test I really wanted to pass to receive that license, that teaching license. To me, that license felt like the first man to step on the moon. It felt possible, but it felt like possibly someone else's dream. But I finally took that step, and I entered the alternative license program, and it was the best decision that I ever taken. My professors, we studied questions of that test. We studied sections. They gave us resources. They gave us assignments. We recorded ourselves teaching lessons with our students. Our professors gave us feedback. It felt like someone was holding my hand. Each step that I got closer. And I got to the point of, I didn't see myself as a statistic no longer, but I saw myself as a broken statistic, one that I was able to break. At 27 years old, I was able to own my very own house. And I was able to do that because of the license, because of the program. The program supported me in receiving this license, this teaching license. The teaching license gave me a career that I love. And from there came higher pay. And I was able to get my very own home. I was able to clear the path for other family members to follow along, because I became first generation in my family. And now the very most special thing to me is that the ALP program was able to put me as an educator where my students could see themselves within me, which is something that I never saw as a child. It's very easy to say give, but I want you all to understand how much this program has affected me. And I really wouldn't be here without this program. And it's so weird because I actually have a picture of myself on my phone. And it's a little girl. And everyone's like, who's that little girl? And I'm like, it's me. And they're like, why do you have yourself? And I say, because I remember how far I've come and where I started. I really wouldn't be here without this program. I am so grateful for this program. It is the best decision. It has affected me in every way possible in my life, from financially to how I see myself, to how I support families, to how I support my students. So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak and to tell you my story.
Yeah. Well, I've had a cold recently. I need to get somebody needs to give me a box of Kleenex because I'm gonna start dripping. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being authentic. Thank you for sharing your story. A lot of times we don't, get the opportunity to hear those stories. But I think there's so many different directions that I could go. But you're proof that in higher education we have to think about how we design our programs. So they convey that you can be successful here. You can come to UIC and be successful. That you have the talent, no matter what messages you heard in your life, that you can be successful, that we will work to identify the financial aid, the finances, the barriers that so many people don't even try. They don't even have a conversation with us. So I hope you know that you serve as a role model to so many others that are going to follow in your footsteps because you've been willing to tell your story. And I think Tim did put in the link, the story that was written about you when you completed. So I do encourage others to read that. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for this
Great to
opportunity.
hear. That's why I come to work. Your story is why I come to work. So.
Thank you so much.
So Natalie, I know you get to hear stories like this all the time because you've worked with more than 200 participants in this program, and you've experienced firsthand the transformation. You've walked alongside people that have experienced things they should not have to experience. I'm not going to get into details there, but can you elaborate at all on transformations that you've seen across the completers, and just how many completers you've had to date? We have a ceremony coming up here in December.
We do. I'm not muted. Okay. Yeah, we do. So I believe by December we'll have 197 completers. Yes, people who have earned their license through the UIC Alternative Licensure Program. We're just honored and to work with the teachers in our communities. I would say that the program, yes, it has been utterly transformational because I believe it changes both the opportunity and identity, right? So this isn't just about getting a license. It's really about, like what Sandra was saying, really about reclaiming a dream that might have felt slightly out of reach or completely out of reach. So we've had teachers who went from earning hourly wages with no benefits to teaching full time with health insurance, paid time off, and jobs that provide stability, right? So one student, for example, after getting her license, started her job and was finally able to schedule her cataract surgery that she needed for years because she finally had benefits. And others, as you've heard again from Sandra, others have become the first in their families to earn a degree. So, yeah, the alternative licensure program, I'm going to refer to it as the ALP from here on out. The ALP does change lives because it's just not in just abstract ways. It's in very real, tangible ones. It restores that confidence and hope, right? It reminds people that they do belong here in higher ed, that their experiences do matter, that they're building something way bigger than themselves. Yeah, so that's what that transformation has looked like to me. And as you can also see on the screen, the ALP program data are, let me see, the mean salary increase for completers, $16,668. That's amazing. 53% of folks who have gone through ALP then went on to earn their master's in ECE. And they also earned an additional credential in early childhood special education. So, yeah, this is what transformation looks like to us in the ALP.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you, Natalie. Appreciate that. Ev, we're going to go back to the online MESA, and it's been fascinating when you've shared the data with me of the positions, the jobs that your students in the program have when they enroll in the program, but also the employers when they complete that hire them. So these are just a small sampling of job titles of students who enroll in the online MESA. So you can just see the number of jobs that are out there that work with data and the impact that this is having. And also on the next slide, the employers, just showing the variety of employers that are looking for people with this degree. And I'm grateful that we have two of our alumni from the MESA Online program with us tonight. So we're going to first start with Sarah Pelter. And Sarah, I would like to start by asking you just to say a little bit about yourself and how has the MESA program affected your career?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Sarah Pelter. I'm currently the Director of Measurement and Research at Intelios, which is a medical certification organization that we also do educational products, and we're a global company. And the MESA program significantly changed the course of my professional life. I had started with the organization about 12 years ago, and I came in from a background. I had a degree, a master's in management from University of Maryland, focusing on nonprofits and nonprofit management. So I came in with the experience of board governance from other nonprofits and things like that. But I quickly developed a passion for the assessment industry. I felt like it was a great way to sort of bring equity to students and professionals across the world. And through a series of circumstances, I ended up working very closely with a psychometrician there and became the director of psychometrics after she retired. And I realized like I had a lot of work experience, professional experience, but and I learned a lot from my mentors there early on, but I really didn't have any formal training. But I had two children, small children at the time, full-time job, and there were great programs around me. University of Maryland has a great measurement program, but I could not figure out in my life how I could get over to that campus, and they didn't offer a part-time program. I couldn't quit my job. So trying to figure out how to pursue this career that I loved and was important to me, and I felt close to the mission. But I got some encouragement from one of my mentors, Dr. David Paulson, who said, "Hey, why don't you check out UIC?" He mentioned a couple alumni he knew, and I knew them from industry conferences. So I did, and it was fantastic for me. And I think it really helped broaden my professional knowledge. I feel like I can support our test takers and the public safety a lot better with a background in formal training and measurements. I've been able to pass on training to our team. I've hired alumni from the program. So it really opened a lot of doors for me.
That's great. So I know that I've heard the argument that you can't really learn online. You know, they're the critics about online learning. We've all heard those critics. So what would you say in response to those critics about can you actually learn through online programs?
Absolutely. In fact, for a lot of people, I think it's a great way to learn. It does require some self-discipline, but when you're interested in the subject, it also allows you the space to learn at your own pace. I'm not one to sit in a noisy classroom and listen to a professor talking for hours. I really need to concentrate on what I'm learning. Sometimes I loved the idea of like backing up recordings or reading material. I also felt like although the MESA program is asynchronous, which worked really well for my schedule, I never really felt alone. You know, in all of the courses, it was mandatory to engage in chats, which was good. It helped you interact. You got to know cohorts in your program as well as the professors, and I always got immediate responses. Even if I waited for like the last minute to do an assignment, I felt like I could reach out and say, "Hey, I'm stuck on this. Can you help? Can you clarify?" So even though sometimes people might think if you're working asynchronously, you're out in the ether somewhere, I never felt that way in the MESA program. And I think it really catered well to my style of learning and my lifestyle.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate that. It's interesting because we have our commencement ceremony twice a year, and when I meet the Mesa Online students, they'll say, "This is my first time on the UIC campus."
I've never been.
Yeah, and so some don't come back for the ceremony, but some actually do. They're like, "No, I want to come and walk across the stage," and but it's also fascinating for them to connect with some folks at the ceremony that they were in those chats together and they did form those relations and the professional networking that comes with that. So
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely.
All right, I'm going to turn it over to Scott Frichard also, Scott is also an alum. So Scott, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, we're thrilled to have you. So talk a little bit about why you enrolled in the MACE Online program and how did the flexibility support your professional goals?
Sure. So the first part of my professional career, I was a paramedic and got into teaching paramedics. And after 20 plus years of that, I shifted into the corporate space and happened to get a really nice job doing program evaluation, thanks to the quantitative studies that I had in my PhD. And I had so much fun doing that. And there was one part of the role, however, that I felt like I needed to know more about, and that was about cognitive assessment and building good tests. Since what I was working on it was for an organization that was global, and some of the tests that I did were high stakes, and so I felt I didn't need to know more. So I went searching for programs that I could do remotely, and it came down to two, this particular one and one other. And like Dr. Smith had said earlier, this program is the only one that checks all the boxes when it comes to evaluation and psychometrics. And that's what I needed. The other one was pure statistics. So for me, it was a no-brainer, and I couldn't have been more thrilled. Not only did I learn a lot more about statistics, evaluation, and psychometrics, but it just opened up a whole new trajectory for my professional journey. And I got into high stakes evaluations with some of the top testing organizations in the world. And it just felt right for me. And every day coming to work wasn't even work. It was something I enjoyed.
Oh, that's great. Well, I appreciate you sharing that, and that you found it to be so worthwhile. And let's see, we have someone near Maryland or in Maryland and someone in New York. So it's great that that this program is impacting people really around the world and around the country. So again, showing evidence that not necessarily to be geographically limited in what we offer. So thank you. And these are just two of the stories from Mesa Online. And Evan and his team have done a great job of collecting kind of the student stories. And they'll populate that link in the chat there. But when you get a little more time, check out some of the stories of the students that have participated in the Mesa Online program. So next, I'm gonna question I always like to end with on the chats, the Dean chats, and also if you have any questions, go ahead and populate those either in the Google Doc or in the chat. We're gonna turn to you next. But Evan, Kathy, if you could dream big, if you had unlimited resources, what would you do to ensure that students who have different life situations and responsibilities would have access to high quality academic programs?
Thanks, Dean Cheval. I think the three things I would classify my dreams under are expanding our reach or opportunities. I think that falls under like bullet points 1 and 4. We've been receiving inquiries for well over a decade to see if we'd open up our PhD program to be online. And I know Sarah said she would enroll if we were able to do so. And I think given the projected growth in the Mesa-related areas, and I scour the job boards every Sunday and shoot out interesting ones to our current and former students. But the Bureau of Labor Statistics indicates that Mesa-type jobs are going to be growing for the foreseeable future. Our own national organization does surveys as well, and it's always the same answer. There's more jobs than there are people to fill them. So I think opening it up to even a broader audience by trying to expand our online offerings to the doctoral level would be good. And then also to try to kind of hook people to going into this field. I'd always wanted to develop and offer a course to undergraduates, because there's really nothing like Mesa at an undergraduate level. So most people that find Mesa, as you heard from Scott and Sarah, they kind of back into us by accident. And that's how a lot of our students are. They get thrust into these environments where they have to learn new skills, then they find us. But to try to hook people before they graduate, I'd like to offer and develop and offer like a course that's kind of fun, as fun as you can make statistics. So how do you lie with statistics? But more importantly, how do you catch others when they're lying with statistics? And I think at an undergraduate level, that would be a nice course to offer to try to hook people into this field, because there are so many opportunities for master's and doctoral level graduates. I think the other thing is obviously the funding. So you have these prospective students, and their real barrier is financial. So I think coming up with research assistantships to help fund their either master's or doctoral work would be tremendously beneficial. Lastly, we've always been very responsive to our employers. So when I scour the job boards to shoot out to our students, two recently reoccurring themes, probably last 6 months to a year, are artificial intelligence and machine learning. And so we're trying to develop courses and would like to develop some courses in those areas as well to expand our offerings and to keep up with technology and with what our employers of our students are looking for. Those would be my dreams. Kathy, what are your dreams?
Well, thanks, Ev. I think like you, expanding our reach is a really important dream for me too. And I'd like to think about how this program could be replicated across the state and even across the country, so that the wonderful early childhood workforce does have this kind of access and opportunity to earn the teacher license, which has so many benefits to them and is so critical for our field. I also really dream about thinking about additional pathways and opportunities for the early childhood workforce, including pathways into leadership. We recently have been collaborating and working on a project to think about a early childhood pathway program into school leadership, principal preparation, because similar to my hunch that these teachers of and from these communities were going to make amazing licensed lead teachers, I think they also could be amazing school leaders. So that is another project that we're sort of dreaming about. And as you can see up on the slide, my big dream, though, of course, is to get some babies over near UIC. So when I retire, I have a place to go to hang out and hold babies and play with young children. And I think that this is just a really important thing for a university like UIC to do, because if we were doing it, we would be elevating the complexity, the skills, and the knowledge that's really required to create learning environments that are supportive for our very youngest children. I think we could be leaders in the field in developing curriculum for these very young children, and also really importantly set up a space and a structure for some community engaged research across the multiple disciplines. I think young children reach everything. We need issues with public housing. We need public, health care, dentistry, et cetera, social work across the board. It's not just the College of Education, but it's the infant toddler at the University of Illinois could probably touch every single college center program that we have at the university. So that is my big swan song for me, is a place to go hold some babies.
Well, I appreciate you both sharing those dreams. And I just wanted to show an example of, when Kathy dreams, she also tries to go find the money for it. So she worked with our grant writer in the college, Tamara Hudgens, sorry, Tamara, I knew I was going to get that wrong, to create the Little Sparks program on our campus for our students that are also parents. And so it's been amazing. It's impacting a large number of students on our campus. So 5% of all of our graduate students are parents, and 3% of our undergraduate students are parents. So, and some of the services they provide that our students really need through Little Sparks, from childcare for low-income students, diapers, wipes, formula, UIC food pantry, so many different things. And I remember when Kathy first started talking to me about Little Sparks years ago when I first got here. So now she's moved on to the next big dream, and we're going to see if we can find folks that can get behind that effort. I'd like to open it up and see if anyone has any questions they'd like to ask our presenters tonight. You can go off mute, you can put it in the chat, you can put it in the Google Doc.
We do have some questions on
All
our
right.
handy dandy questions from the audience sheet.
Okay, Natalie, go
Um,
ahead.
All right. So this one says the educator license is important, but I'm wondering if ALP alumni go on to earn endorsements, such as an ESL or bilingual education endorsement. I mean, Kathy,
Natalie,
I can
you
start
could
it. I
answer
can
that
take
question
it.
yourself. It's like one to
I
you,
know.
but I'll take it just to
You-
break it up a little bit. But
Okay,
yes,
that's fine. Yeah.
but yes, of course. And we talk so much about creating pathways where we know once people get in and they build the confidence and they build the skills, they keep coming back to us and saying, "What's next?" You know, I want to do what's next, which is why you see more than half of the people who complete the alternative licensure program go on to do their master's degree where they do earn the early childhood special ed endorsement on their license. And then we also partner really closely with city colleges so that people can simultaneously be working on their ESL endorsement while they're with us, or they can come and work on it later. And Natalie and I do get lots of phone calls like, what's next, which is what sort of motivated us in thinking about building this pathway program into school leadership, because our folks want to keep coming back and learning more and contributing more.
And just to add to that, our folks take those endorsement courses at no cost whatsoever because we have that very fruitful partnership with the Chicago Early Learning Workforce Scholarships. And that just helps ensure that our teachers are going to continue advancing their credentials and just without the financial barriers that really often stand in the way.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much. All right, we've come to the end. I'm going to show a few slides just for the last couple minutes about what's been happening in the college. So Sandra, if you can put the first one up there. So first of all, one of the things that started with this fall, UIC, the chancellor and her team launched the UIC Aspire Grant. If you live in the Chicago area, you might see these on the buses or the billboards, but any student whose family has 75,000 or less is eligible for the Aspire Grant. And that was more than 3,000 students with our first class, new students this fall on the UIC campus. So please encourage those that don't think they have the financial resources to apply for the Aspire Grant. Students that are first year students, it's 4 years, and new transfer students, it's 2 years. And so that was 51% of our incoming freshman class at UIC. So a large portion of our students are receiving the UIC Aspire Grant, which is fantastic. The next slide shows our enrollment. And so for the fall of 25, people always want to say, since they're hearing a lot about education not doing well with enrollments, the College of Education is doing well. So a 7.8% increase this fall for our population overall from last fall. And in terms of new students, all programs, that's the next slide. Sandra, there it is, 397. So we had 397 new students, all programs in fall of 25, and you see the growth there over the last 4 years. So that's good news. Next slide, Sandra. We continue to try and establish new scholarships in the college, and I was able to host 15 of our students were invited that received the Asaph Keller Scholarship this year, and so just continue to look for resources so our students can be successful here. Next slide. And we always want to highlight when faculty have new books that come out, and so this is Dakota Irby's edited book, Doing the Work of Equity Leadership for Justice and Systems Change. So check out that. And I just want to thank our alumni that showed up tonight, all of our friends taking time out to spend with us. Thanks for our presenters, the faculty, the staff, and also Sandra, Scott, and Sarah. Sorry, did I get that right? I hope I got that right. I'm gonna blame that one on the cold. So thanks for joining us, and I hope you'll join us next time. And let us know if you want to connect with us and how you can work together with us to continue to do well. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you for this program. It was wonderful. Thank you.